good evening, everybody, and welcome to the intro to the cost of being in business. And just as a sort of background, it's just one of those items that I've found in all of my travels through IOPS and interacting with plumbers throughout the country, is that it's one of those areas that huge discrepancies in terms of what does it actually cost to being in business. And again, many individuals get incorrect information. So it's been one of those items that we've looked at and said, look, you know, how do we get to that rate? And through this, with our objectives is just to ensure that we understand the basics of the cost of being in business, to empower and equip service technicians and administrators, and to enhance service level agreements. So in terms of plumbing, we know that from a practical training point of view that the hand skills, motor skills are taught, but when it comes to business acumen, very little courses in terms of exactly how plumbers should define and work out their rates and how to operate a business successfully. And I'm hoping, and I'm sure that we will achieve a better overall view of how and what it costs to actually be in a business. So I think, again, just thank you very much to our sponsors. And I'm sure that we'll all get a lot of value out of what we have today. And once again, thank you very much to everybody for taking the time out and attending this evening. Our objective: to dissect the true cost of being in business, empower and equip service technicians and frontline administration to enhance service level standards, increase profitability. The course will cover a variety and interaction is encouraged. So as Lee said, sending the questions through, and we'll try wherever possible to answer all of the questions provided. My name is Steve Brown. I'm the past president of the Institute of Plumbing, as Lee said. So I've sat on the Institute of Plumbing board as president, chairman of KZN. I've sat on the World Plumbing Council as operations manager now, part of the establishment of the PIRB. I am a plumbing contractor, qualified over 30 odd years ago. We were looking and talking about it today, and when I see 40 years coming up and the grey hairs, then you know that you've been in this industry for a long time. So I think from my side, I just want to add a bit of value. I'll talk about scenarios that I've been involved with in terms of business and assistance that I've provided to contractors right throughout the country. So I think that for me, it's just a privilege to actually provide and equip people with what I've learned over the years. So thank you very much. So here's the question. Everybody says it. It's common knowledge that plumbers make more than doctors. As a statement, is this correct? I think from the consumer's point of view, they would say certainly yes. My doctor charges 450 Rand for 15 minutes, which equates to 1,800 Rand per hour. I'm not too sure of how many plumbers are in that bracket. My guess is none. The point is, as a professional, we should be charging correctly. As an example, a general practitioner charges less than a specialist. Being a specialist generates higher costs. In most cases within the plumbing fraternity, this is not the case, and one needs to ask the question as to why this is. It is really quite simple. We do not know how to calculate what our exact cost of being in business is. Because we've not been taught this, we in most cases go on advice of opposition costs or base ourselves in the middle of the average charge-out rate of local newspapers, etc. But very few contractors actually sit down and work out the true cost of being in business. Why are we in business? It's quite simple. To make money. A lot of contractors that I speak to earn a living. They're surviving. And in terms of small businesses, we've just had the World Plumbing Council conference in Cape Town last month, and it was disappointing to see how many local plumbers actually attended the conference. And through all of the communications that we had, and the emails and phone calls, the nitty-gritty came down to they couldn't afford to go there. And that's a sad state of affairs, that the majority of plumbers in this country couldn't go and see a world-class event held within their own country due to the fact that they didn't or couldn't generate the income to get there, which tells you, again, that in terms of their business, they're not learning. It's like being a hamster in a wheel. Nobody's taking the time to actually ensure and equip individuals on what it actually costs to be in business. So we're in business to make money, not to get by, not to just make ends meet. The whole concept of being in business is to actually make money and ensure that you have a better life for yourself and everybody else. Otherwise, you may as well just work for a boss. Lee, we have our next slide, which is a poll. Can we go to that poll, please?
I got that for you. So I'm bringing it up for you now. So the majority of plumbing companies in South Africa. There it is. Okay, Steve. So guys, the majority of plumbing companies within South Africa define their rates based on their opposition, define their rates based on their true cost of being in business, base their rates on insurance company set rates. Please guys, for those new to it, it's a poll, so just indicate what you believe is the right answer there. Okay, we've got 70% people voted to date. Kerry, just mark it in there. You know, so you say it's based on the opposition, just indicate, select it in the panel. You know, select it there, please. Right, 85%. I think we're going to close that poll off, guys. Right. Steve, as you can see, 55% say they define their rates based on their opposition. 36% define their rates based on the true cost to be in business. And only 9% say base their rates on insurance company set rates. Okay.
Okay, I think, Lee, that gives a very interesting outcome in terms of exactly where and how those rates are defined. So I think that in terms of where we are, looking at the way that it is, again, looking at opposition and insurance rates, and obviously those that are calculating it on the true cost of their businesses. So I think that the next one is that, you know, what's the going rate for a plumber? I think that from my officer side, we've asked this question on numerous occasions and gone right throughout the country and said, look, you know, what is the average rate for a plumber? You know, what should he be charging in terms of his hourly rates? And we've had, in terms of what we have in front of us here, we have 350 to 450. But we've also had guys that are coming in at 200, 180, 220. So again, it's way across the field in terms of what those costs are. And very clear that individuals base it on what their opposition is, looking at local newspapers or whatever, establishing a rate, and not clearly looking at what their business is and what their costs are. And the key here is, unfortunately, most plumbers have no idea how to establish this rate. And I think that through the webinar today, that we'll certainly lay the foundation down, that the guys can actually have a look at their business. And I think the key thing is to be honest with yourself. I think when you go and look back after this webinar and it comes up, is to actually look at your business, look at the structure that's there in terms of the budget, and then be true to yourself. Just sit and be honest. Do I have this? Do I do that? Whatever. Look back and see how it goes. So how do we arrive at a plumbing rate? Most contractors, as we said, are unable to establish a rate. The figures in this presentation, we based it on estimated averages right throughout some of the companies that we've communicated with. And they've been canvassed from various parts of the country, Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town, and we've sort of garnered all of this information together. So in order to get these figures. here's a couple of statements that come through. Just to give you an idea, it's not to answer or a question, but again, these are things consumer, which one would be more believable? A consumer receives after-hours service from a doctor at no extra charge, or the other one, plumber works after hours at normal rates. I think based on this, we would clearly see that certainly the doctor is not going to work after hours at no extra charge, but yet a large majority of the plumbers that I deal with work after hours for a normal rate, just to get by, just to take work on. So again, we have a look at this. And this is like the type of mindset that we need to change in terms of the value that we as plumbers bring to the consumer. Based on a recent external survey on behalf of the Institute of Plumbing South Africa, 70% of plumbers in South Africa are insolvent. This is a major concern, battling to pay staff, constantly in overdraft, battling to pay suppliers, cutting back on advertising, can't finance motor vehicle repairs or purchase new equipment. All of these items start showing a warning flag. They start showing that there's great concern in terms of the business. And I think a lot of guys just get into this mindset of, well, I can't do better, I can't charge more, you know, nobody will pay that. So, and I think that that's something that from a position of giving self-doubt, and I think we really need to look at ourselves as being more professional in what we do. And the only way that we can do that is by starting to look at our businesses and charge the right rate. I mean, it's no use buying something for 10 Rand and then giving it away for 8 Rand. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I have plumbers who tell me that they don't have a markup on their materials. And what is the point? I mean, if you're buying it, surely you've traveled, you've picked it up, you've brought it to the consumer, you've installed it. You're entitled to do that. So again, guys just not understanding in terms of the question. Plumbers being bullied by the consumer in terms of, oh, I can get it cheaper, or you're the most expensive. You know, we need to be able to be in a position where we can say, well, I know what my true cost of business is because I've done the calculations and this is not a thumb suck. So I think that it's very alarming that 70% of the plumbers in South Africa are insolvent. And that has a major impact in terms of merchants, suppliers, the whole chain gets affected by this problem of plumbers just battling through month in and month out, and contractors going through month out. So I think the key thing here is that, yes.
Steve, I just want to just interject there, just for the guys who don't understand what insolvent means. Insolvent, guys, means that if the money that you got in your company, all the money, if you add up all your assets, your money, your vehicles, and all that you owe, your liabilities, if your liabilities exceed your assets, you are insolvent. Okay, Steve, just wanted to add that one in.
I think also, you know, Lee and myself spent some time in Australia, and we work very closely with the PIC in Australia. And the key factor within Australia is that in order to go into business, you have to prove that you can actually run a business. Now, we know that that does not happen in South Africa, but it just goes to show the extremes of how serious things are taken in other parts of the world, that you are required to actually attend business courses in order to open that business. So in South Africa, we know that you can open up a business tomorrow, you know, a piece of pipe and a wheelbarrow and off you go. But again, a lot of us, like myself, my first 10 years of being in business was an absolute nightmare because I had no clue. I was a good plumber, but it just didn't make me a good businessman. So I was running around trying to please other people. I didn't want to offend people by charging too much, but yet it was adversely affecting myself. So I think these are type of things that we need to really look at and analyze as we go through this. I think for me, one of the points that I went to in one of the seminars, and they didn't take it in terms of being a plumber, but basically they looked at it and said there's a difference between a plumber going into business as opposed to a businessman going into plumbing. And I think there's a big difference in that. As I've said earlier, as a plumber, he's taught the motor skills, he's taught, you know, how to repair and everything else. But in terms of communication, in terms of running a business, understanding what the requirements are of running a business are, they just have no clue. And I, as I've said earlier, was one of those guys. So being a great plumber didn't necessarily make me a lot of money, and I certainly battled for the first 10 years, and hernias and grey hairs were certain second to none. But I think that, again, 10 years of being in business, and I was educated by the University of Hard Knocks. I paid massive school fees because of my lack of business knowledge. And to be honest, I think these webinars are great because, as I've said, I've been in this game for 40 years, and there was nowhere where we could actually sit in our homes or whatever the case may be and get this type of information. So information in that day and age was certainly lacking, and I see huge potential in terms of these type of webinars. Again, for me, it was a huge setback. Being a great plumber did not mean I was a great businessman. I made huge costly mistakes. And again, there are just some individuals that are out there that, for reasons for whatever, there will always be employers and employees. And in essence, there are some guys that should just not work for themselves. I mean, in terms of businesses, and I don't want to offend anybody, but it's a fact. A lot of guys go into business thinking that they see how much the boss invoices or how much they invoice, and they base it on that. So I think that they don't understand what the actual costs are, what the boss actually incurs. They just see the value that's invoiced. So I think it's one of those things that we need to, again, create awareness of. It's a known fact that the vast, and as much as I've got vast, but about 50%, the majority of business fail in the first 5 years. It's therefore imperative that feasibility studies, business plans, etc. in place prior to opening. And I know that for some guys it's very difficult. But if you look at that 50% of businesses failing, let's look at the impact of what that has on you. Just having an adverse credit rating basically stops you from purchasing a vehicle, opening an account, or whatever the case may be. So for the next 5 years, you're hindered. So if you're going into business at 22 and you work for 2 and go out of business, by the age of 30, it's going to be by the time you're 35 that you now maybe rehabilitated or you've got your ducks in a row. And those are big school fees, in terms of, especially in this day and age with the technology available in terms of searches and everything else. So again, without that business acumen, going into business, 50% of the guys are going to struggle and battle their way through it. I hear a lot of plumbers, their comments, they feel that they're working to pay others a salary. I don't know if any of you guys have ever felt like that, but I certainly did. I think come Friday, after I've worked 4 days and spent Friday chasing money to pay wages, that's what I felt like. I felt like I had just been working just to pay others' salaries. So again, the planning ahead in terms of registering your business with SARS, meeting all the requirements with workman's compensation, unemployment, etc. All of those things are a cost. And a lot of people or a lot of contractors think that if they don't have them, because there's a cost, then they can charge a reduced rate. And I think that in terms of that, they're robbing themselves because these are must-haves. These are not about should-haves. These are about must-haves. They're items that shouldn't be left on the table, because in order to run a professional business, these are the requirements in terms of the law and any other legislation that goes with it. So I think it's key that we look at these items and make sure that we have them. Local authorities. Again, not all over the country, but there are some local authorities in which you're required to register with them. Durban is one. You have to have your plumbing business registered. You have to have yourself as a licensed plumber within the eThekwini area, that you are licensed. And there are other communities and areas that you have, as well as with the PIRB. So I think it's the type of thing that we need to bring into our costings and those items and make sure that we have it, and you just don't get the knock on the door from the local inspector and he doesn't want to pass your work. So I think these are key items that we need to look at, again, in terms of starting your business. Again, a statement. Lawyer reduces hourly rate due to the client advising he's too expensive. Which one is more believable? Plumber reduces hourly rate due to client advising he's too expensive. I mean, it's a no-brainer. The plumber will reduce his hourly rate just to appease the client. I mean, I don't know of any lawyer that is certainly going to reduce his rate. through IOPSA and my communications with plumbers all over the country, I think one of the critical things is paperwork. You know, in terms of administration of the business, I think it's one of the key components that we tend to lack very much in terms of detail. I see it daily where consumers are more armed than the contractor in terms of times, notes, dates, spent on site, everything else, and it becomes very difficult to try and defend somebody who has no information, and that all of the paperwork, the clients kept all of the details, emails, etc. So we do get swamped in terms of paperwork. I say that every session, you know, the power of the pen is certainly, the pen is mightier than the sword, and I think that we tend to run around chasing work, but we forget about the paperwork, and that's key. I mean, if, you know, to get your money in, you have to invoice, you need to keep those things going.
Yeah, Steve, I'll interject in that specific. I think there's a whole course alone on how to do your paperwork correctly. And if I'm not mistaken, you'll be addressing that in your customer cares going forward courses.
Correct. Lee, we do that in terms of the customer care, you know, in terms of that. So again, that's one of the courses to look at going forward in terms of business owner and customer care. So Lee, our next slide is a poll.
Steve, the next one is a financial budget. Guys, the next one that Steve's bringing up, I don't know, you want to talk to it, Steve? It's fine, no problem.
In terms of
financial budget, yeah,
is required
away,
for, yeah. Lee, I don't have that slide on here. Have you got it there?
Oh, okay, right. So guys, yeah, a financial budget applies to, guys, just have a look, large corporations or businesses only when your business is starting. So what do you think the answer to that, guys, is? Okay, we've got 92% voted. We're just waiting, just give it a couple of more seconds. And Steve, you can see it in your, if you look at your attendees view pane, you'll see it there. There's a little pane that you look at. Just make that one a little bit bigger there. Just get your technical assistant to help you there. Okay, I'm going to close the poll off, Steve. Right, okay. And I'm going to share it with the guys. And if you look at your pane there, you'll see that 100% have people that said that all businesses, a budget should apply to all businesses. So we've got a very astute audience here, Steve. Good.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I think the guys are 100% on track. And you guys, well done. I think that all businesses, you know, require a budget. And I think that in terms of that budget is the foundation. As we know in the building trade or any trade, the foundation to any successful building or business is based on the foundation that you build, based on true costs, based on the actual cost of being in business. So well done, guys. I think that was very positive. So as we touched earlier, just keeping up to date with administration is vital to running a professional business. I think, you know, it's just one of the key items. And making sure that we have all of those items ticked away in terms of our invoicing, debtors, creditors, etc., etc. So those are the key items. So now we look at how one establishes creating, understanding your overheads in order to define a rate to cover your cost of being in business. Sorry guys, my assistant's just flicking this over. You know, you just can't get good help anywhere these days, you know. You know, it's bad enough having a co-pilot. When you have a co-pilot, it's even worse. And I'm not the user. I'm normally the abuser, guys, but this is the user. So please don't blame me. So when you rate the presentation at the end, just put in a little note about the co-pilot here. All right, gents, let's now look at how an establisher is creating, understanding your overheads in order to define a rate to cover your costs. So I think that in terms of our budget, we've looked at a one-truck operation.
Steve,
and bearing in mind, yes.
Steve, I just have to jump in there. Richard says that you haven't budgeted for proper staff.
No, because I'm still battling with that type of stuff, Richard. You know, what can I say? I asked for an increase and they asked me how I'd like my peanuts, salted or plain, you know. But Richard, thank you for your comment. It's much appreciated. Right, so we've looked at a one-truck operation, and you know we've tried to include all of the items, and they're all variously spread across the board here. And I think the key thing for this is to, when this course comes up again, and you can view it in your own time, to start having a look at these figures. And bearing in mind, these figures are not verbatim. These are not figures that we've sat down and said are exact. They are going to vary from one contractor to another. So I think that this is just as a guideline for us to just show you those items that should be in your budget. So we have accounting. Obviously, from an accounting point of view, looking at keeping a good clean set of books, very key in terms of application for finance or opening up accounts or things like that. So again, any business that's run with proper accounting systems, showing profit and loss, again, is key to advancing and growing your business. Your administration in terms of the office, advertising in terms of where you are. An item that guys don't allow for is in terms of bad debts. So again, these are going to be costs that you're going to have. Not everybody pays their accounts. So having a look at a cost of what is going to connect you for bad debts. And, you know, we look at it and say, well, what would that cost be? But bearing in mind, every time your good lady in the office is going to pick up that phone and phone Mrs. Jones for her money, that's a cost. You know, it's looking at that time to collect your money. Bank charges, again, depending on how well or how badly you're doing, you still have bank charges. Cell phones, entertainment, client hospitality, key items, defective workmanship. A lot of guys will work from home, but again, if you've got a bookkeeper, they'll start looking at what percentages in terms of electricity and rental you can actually apply legally through your business in terms of recovery for certain areas within your property. So again, you can recover those items. Furniture, replacing of things. Your Girl Friday. Now that Girl Friday, sometimes it's the wife or the girlfriend that's doing this, and we tend to not include them in terms of a cost. So yeah, that. Internet, invoice, quote books, income protectors. You know, a key item as a self-employed artisan, breaking a leg playing rugby or doing whatever could put you out of business. We had a friend of ours who built a business for just over 20 years and unfortunately had a stroke, and without that income protector, he's put his whole family at risk in a 20-year business. So I think it's a key item. It costs money, but bearing in mind, it's something that you need to look at to just keep your business going and making it sustainable. Then you'll have your general workers, legal fees. We don't want to pay lawyers, but again, it's making provision for it. Medical aid. What surprised me in a lot of the seminars and workshops and roadshows that I've done is when I ask a question in terms of how many of you guys here have medical aid, and up to 60 to 70% of the contractors that are in those meetings do not have medical aid. When you ask them about insurance, they don't have it. Your office equipment, obviously petrol, plant repairs. The next one, the plumber owner. You know, you're an employee within the business. You're entitled to earn a salary. Now, many of the contractors that I speak to get paid out of what's left. So they don't even put themselves in as what they would earn as a salary. They look at it once they've paid all of the items that they have to pay, what's left is theirs. And that's certainly not the way to go forward in terms of building a budget based on, you know, what's left on the table. I think it gives a negative effect in terms of your whole budget and your whole outlook in terms of your business. So you work there, you're a value, you're an asset to the company, therefore you should be entitled to putting in your salary. Your semi-skilled operator, Product insurance in terms of products, product liability, something that a lot of contractors don't have. And again, you might say, well, I've got liability and I've got this insurance, but what do you do when there's a dispute between yourself and the supplier of that product? The consumer is not going to go away. So in terms of product insurance is a key item, protective clothing, public liability, repairs and maintenance, stationery, subscriptions, whether it be to IOPSA or to the PILB as registration, whatever those items are. Landlines, if you do have it. And one of the key things that we tend to not focus on is training of our staff, training of ourselves. So putting an allowable in there to go on to webinars like we have now, bringing our staff in. And then in terms of vehicle, just to touch on this, we brought this in because we haven't discussed, and I think some of you guys went on the webinar in terms of defining the call-out rate. So these figures may change slightly, but most guys don't apply the call-out rate, and we'll get to that later on. But there is a whole webinar based on working out and calculating your call-out fees. So I think it's one for those guys that are in attendance here is to possibly have a look at that one later on. And that figure may slightly change in terms of the numbers here, but this is just to give us an indication of where we are. So in terms of, sorry if we can go back, Bianca. If we look at those figures, I mean, it basically gives us an overhead of 62,910 Rand. Now, when you look at that 62,910 Rand and you've covered all of those items, basically that's what you're in for. Without doing any work for the month, you now have to generate 62,910 Rand. That's without a profit. That's just covering all of those charges. So come the first of the month, by the 30th or the 31st or the 29th, that's what you have to generate in terms of labor to cover the costs of your overheads, but this is without a profit. So we've established our overheads and what our monthly costs are. We can now determine a rate per hour to cover the overhead and generate a profit. So as we've gone through our overheads, we've got 62,910 Rand. We'd like a minimum of 15%. Which would then give us a total overhead of 72,346 Rand 50. So that's with a bit of a profit in it. And bearing in mind, we haven't put anything with regards to material here because material is going to be a variance. Some months you might have bigger items, you might just do tap washers, etc. So again, it's just to look at that basic 15% in terms of your labor and what you need to generate in terms of that. So based on average, there's a couple of numbers that come out. Some are 20.3. We've worked on the 21.6 days per month. These are working days. We're not talking about Saturdays, Sundays, after hours. Because really speaking, who wants to work Saturdays, Sundays, and after hours? We want to have a decent life. We want to operate on weekends, go surfing, do whatever we do. So let's look on the average of 21.6 days per month. We take our overhead of 72,346 Rand 50. Dividing this by average monthly working days of 21.6, we determine our daily minimum rate. So our overhead of 72, by billable days being the 21.6, we'll divide 21 into the 72, which basically gives us an overhead per day of 3,349 Rand and 38 cents. So basically, in terms of that figure, that's what we need to generate every day in terms of those 21.6, those average working days. If we do that, it's going to cover our overheads and give us 15% profit. Our daily rate can now be worked back to an hourly rate. And I think when it comes to plumbing, we look at it and we say, what do we have in terms of with lawyers, doctors, what do we have in common? And I think the key thing is that doctors and lawyers, just like plumbers, we sell hours. And I think that's a key thing it gets back to, is that from a professional point of view, doctors, lawyers, etc., they've broken this down. They understand what they require in terms of selling, and it basically boils down to selling hours. And we are exactly the same. It's about selling hours. So in terms of that, it must be considered we open from 8 to 9 hours per day. However, we don't work 8 to 9 hours per day running service. We look at it in terms of billable hours. And as we know, the way that traffic's going, especially in Richards area down in the Cape and some parts of Joburg and Durban, travel time cut between service calls has certainly reduced the amount of billable hours that we can do in a day. So lost hours from travel, quotations, time spent at the suppliers is all considered. Industry averages for service vehicles are between 4 and 5 billable hours per day. So we are open for 8 to 9 hours, but we're actually being productive in terms of physically charging out at 4 to 5 billable hours per day. And the some of the comments that came back from guys up in Johannesburg and things are saying it's actually getting reduced, it's actually getting smaller. So again, with traveling and all of the disruptions that we have in our daily lives, this is the type of key thing. So 4 to 5 billable hours per day, bearing in mind that we're paying staff 8 to 9 hours a day. So we have overhead of 3,349.38. Billable hours, we'll divide that by 5, which gives us an hourly rate of 669 Rand 88. So in terms of that, we've worked out our overhead per day, billable hours, hourly rate 669.88. So in terms of this rate and the hours obtained, it will cover all expenses and produce a profit. However, it must be noted that as materials are variance, market materials will be shown as additional profit on the management accounts produced by the bookkeeper or your accountant. Lee, our next slide is a poll.
Okay, great, Steve. Okay, guys, the next poll that will be coming up to you. Okay, so get ready. Please give us your input there. Within your business, how important is your budget? So, and we're not talking about what you think of your opposition. You know, we want to know what you do. I don't work to a budget. I have one, but don't focus on it much. Review monthly, because it's a key component to running my business. So guys, let's see how we do that. Good, it's looking good. And we got 69% of the people voting. And Steve, while the guys are still voting, Richard has just come in with a question, which is quite an interesting one. He's asking, should we be charging for time spent at clients quoting? Or, I mean, and he's also then making a suggestion, or is it predominantly on jobs worth less than 1,000 Rand? What is your viewpoint on that, why everybody's voting?
I think, Lee, it goes back to what the Consumer Protection Act states, because it basically defines in terms of the Consumer Protection Act that, you know, there are certain items that you can't charge for. However, I look at it more as a diagnostics, because again, you have to do something in order to get something. So again, for myself in the businesses that I've ran, I had no such thing as what I would call a free quotation. Again, I went to some jobs that were like plumbers conventions. There was more plumbers there than there were at IOPSA meetings, because everybody was doing free quotations. And my philosophy was that if the client was prepared to pay the service call or the call out fee or the diagnostics fee, whatever you want to call it, then they were really serious about getting the work done. So there's different views in that, but these are what I applied in terms of my business. And I applied it that if they accepted the quotation that I provided, then I would drop the cost of the quotation or the diagnostics or the service call. So that's how I applied that in terms of my business. But I think that applying business mind. There are some guys that feel that they would be able to sell that job when they get to it, but that's just my opinion and how I did it.
Yeah, I would agree with your statement, Steve. I think each business will have to weigh up each way in which the quote is, where it is, how far it is away from their central point, etc., etc. I do it very similar to you. I go out to the client, I say to the client, we're going to charge you a call-out fee, but if we accept the job, we will discount it back to you for that specific one. It's not easily acceptable in people's minds. As I say to you on the call-out rate, in the cost to calculate your call-out, ultimately it's a cost to your business, and you need to absorb it somewhere. And we say to the clients as well, we say to them, well, if bring your house to me, and then I can quote for you in front of me. But if I can't do that, there's a cost that I need to go out, and I need to recover that cost. But anyway, so let's quickly give you this. We're just going to quickly share what the poll results were. So it's quite interesting, Steve, that quite a few, 50% of the audience actually use it as a key component in running their businesses. So that's quite interesting to look at from that perspective. And then it just breaks down on the other ones, as you can see there. But it's quite interesting that we've got the bulk of the audience sitting there that they do use it as a key component in their business. Great.
No, that's great. I think it's very positive in terms of that. Yes, I think it's very positively in terms of the 50% of guys that are there, and I think that for me, and just to touch on that, is that a lot of the businesses that I ran or owned, I only really got to identify with the critical aspect of that budget is when my business was bought out by one of the largest plumbing companies in Durban, and I had to deal with a bean counter stroke accountant every day. But again, the value that I actually learned from the accountant and the way that budget was structured and how stringent they were, I think we can all understand that if we go shopping with the wife and we want to put the digestive biscuits in and buy $100 worth of biltong, and the wife tells us it's not in the budget. I think we can relate to that, and that's where I found with working with an accountant that I saw the true nature and purpose of that actual budget. So, and he was very strict in terms of that. If it wasn't in, it wasn't in. And it was something that he would review. It wasn't set in the 1st of January. Was it till the 1st of January the following year? It was something that we looked at sometimes weekly, monthly. We would look at it 3 months into it, or quarterly. So I think it's very key that the guys are working with that, which I think is brilliant. Right, again, we just have a statement. Again, it's just to look at that business acumen. Architect amends drawings free of charge, or a plumber amends work at no extra charge. And again, going back to what Lee was saying, if there's a cost, you need to generate a return in terms of that cost. So I think everybody looking at their businesses will do something different. But again, the one fact that came across from the accountant that I dealt with after you had purchased my business was that you used a statement, and I have it in these here, that cost is fact, meaning the cost to do that is fact. If it costs you 100 Rand, then it's 100 Rand. You can't get away from that. The cost is 100 Rand. And the reason that we're in business is to make money, so therefore you need to have a profit. So his statement that we lived with every month was cost is fact and profit is policy. We are in business to make a profit. And he and everyone around him, we work to that philosophy, is that cost is fact and profit is policy. And I think that sometimes for us, and I know I've done it myself, is that we'll work on a job for 3 or 4 days, and then we'll go back home and work out exactly what that cost is, and then looking at the final figure go, oh my goodness, they won't pay that. And what do we start doing? We start going back and trying to cut here and take an hour out here, which again, we are giving away for free. Cost is fact, profit is policy. That's the type of thing. If you can take anything away from this, apply that to your business. Cost is fact, profit is policy. I think a lot of guys will charge less, and it'll keep you busy. But again, as I've said before, it's like eating soup with a fork. It'll keep you busy, but you'll eventually starve. And we need to realize that this running around trying to do 10 service calls at 200 Rand, where we could actually do 3 service calls at 500 Rand, reduces all our running around and makes us more profitable. So I think that we must stop selling ourselves short. I think we really need to look at the value that we add as plumbers, as being professional, and get paid for what we're worth. Right, then we've got additional factors. We've reviewed the monthly budget. Yes, sir.
Steve, I just want to check. We've got 5 minutes to go, right? You must probably got another 10 minutes. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, 10 minutes, Lee.
10 minutes. Can I ask the audience, is everybody happy to continue for the next 10, 15 minutes? Just raise your hands quickly so we can see if everybody's happy with that. If you're comfortable with that. Thanks, Robert. There we go. Okay. Looks like everybody's okay with that. Good, but guys, if you have to leave, feel free to leave. We are recording the session, as I said, and you will be getting the link in the next 2 days just to review it, go through it, and have a look at it again. Okay, Steve, great. Carry on.
Thank you, Lee. I think that now that we've looked at our monthly budget, there's other items that we need to consider, other factors that give a truer reflection in terms of our rate. We have public holidays, there's bonus pay, there's sick leave, there's leave pay. And all of the above at a cost of the business, and that these are days in which no hours are sold. And if we do provide the service on that day, then there's a cost to us in terms of paying double time and sometimes triple time for our staff. And I think that these are items that we need to look at. Public holidays, bonus pay, sick leave, and leave pay. Again, we're entitled to leave, and as business owners, time off to recharge the batteries is essential. I think for me, one of the main reasons for selling my business is that I'd gone for about 7.5 years without actually taking leave. Not because I was that busy and I was making a lot of money. It was just that I really couldn't afford to go on there. So again, we need to be able to charge our batteries. And I think one of the questions that when we're being realistic is look at ourselves and say, when last did I have a month's holiday? Can I afford to close up my business and take my kids away or the family away or whatever, other than taking a long weekend here and a day here? And I think that those are one of the things that are important to us. I think the stresses of being in the service business do take their toll, and we need to be able to recharge batteries. But in order to do that, we need to be able to be realistic and recharge those batteries without having the stress of sitting there worrying about the poor bank manager or anybody else. So I think it's key that we line and build that foundation for our leave and being able to take time off. And we need to cover these items within our rate per hour. Other items that could come in, again, provident pension fund for staff can be included, medical for staff, budgeting for extra plant to purchase, leak detection and drain cleaning equipment, all again can be included in your budget. I think again, we're just talking in terms of that. This is a guideline and it's based on the should haves and then based on, again, this you can't get good help, guys. What can I say? Okay, but again, must haves rather than the should haves, and then based on the cost as fact, profit as policy. And there'll be variances, as we said before, in terms of companies. Applying the principles, we'll take the previous one truck overhead of 72,000, calculating over a 12-month period. We'll take the 72,000, and times it by 12 will give us a total annual overhead of 868,158 Rand. We'll divide this figure by 10.5 months, taking into account the lost hours, public holidays, etc. I think South Africa has one of the highest rates of public holidays. And bearing in mind, these are holidays that don't include those Mondays and the Thursday holiday, and everybody takes the Friday. So if you apply this in terms of that, then certainly those holidays creep up and take more time out of what you've got in terms of generating. So we'll take the annual overhead of 868,000, we'll divide it by 10.5. That'll give us a monthly overhead of 82,681 Rand and 71 cents. Taking this figure of 82,681 Rand and 71 cents, we will then divide by the 21.6 working days. This gives us a total of 3,827 Rand 86 to be invoiced per day. When I say per day, but that's what we should be looking at in terms of our daily sales. Now, I think with this, sometimes it's like applying and playing golf. You know, in the first hole, you've got par 1 or par 4. That would mean you've hit your target. The next day, you might be under par, where you've invoiced 4,000. But at the end of the day, you're looking at that figure as your yardstick and your basic in terms of what you need to generate on a daily basis. In my business, we used to have sales figures in terms of labor as a guideline for staff to create incentives. But every day we looked at that figure as what did we invoice in terms of a labor on that particular day, and that was my yardstick based on what my overheads were there. But I think it's a key thing to look at, and it's quite a simple exercise to do on a daily basis as you just start ticking the boxes. Since we've established our daily rate, we now apply the chargeable hours as an average of 5. This gives our total hourly rate. We'll take the 3,827.86 divided by an average of 5 hours, and our true hourly rate is 765 Rand and 57 cents. And that is now the truer cost of what we need to be able to charging in terms of a one-truck operation in order to cover all of our overheads with our medical costs, and that is 765 Rand 57. The key thing that comes out of that, whenever we've done this before, is that individual contractors have said, we'll never get that rate. We will never be able to charge that. And my question to that, again, is we're already putting negative thoughts in our minds that we'll never get it. But I think that if you go around, look at Johannesburg, some of the successful businesses there, in Bloemfontein, in one area in particular, there's one individual that's been in business for 20 odd years and actually charges more than that. So I think that we mustn't look at in terms of I'll never get that. Is that are we actually providing that professional service? Do we look the part? What do our trucks look like? I think that the more professional we get in terms of what we're doing and run our businesses on service rather than price. I think that if we're looking at service, people are looking to get somebody there today. They want somebody there that's going to be on time, and we touch on this in our customer care. But I think that going in just solely on price puts you at great risk in terms of your business. It can be dangerous, and that profitability on sales, you're not going to be able to sustain the overheads, and we just start eventually cutting. I've seen contractors start off with a great view of A, B, C, D, and halfway through the month, their rates gone down and plummeted because they just can't or cannot promote or run their businesses in terms of that. A lot of guys are spending turnover rather than profit. Yes, sir.
100%. So, Steve, I mean, it's I can envisage guys sitting there and they look at that 750 Rand and they're going, not in a million years. Exactly what you said there. They're saying, holy cow, how can we even get to that? But let's just go back to the polls. What did the poll say? The poll clearly indicated, how do I look at my business to calculate it? Majority, everybody said, I look at the other business and then calculate my based on the other business. Don't do it that way, guys. You now have seen that 750 Rand. It might not be your cost, but do yourself a favor, guys. Go back, re-look at this thing on the recording, and go and take out what you don't think should be in that specific thing, or change it to what you think is best for you. And I guarantee you guys, you're going to come in the region of about 500 to 750 Rand. Also, if the guys have downloaded the app, the Plumbers app, there's actually a calculator on there to calculate the specific thing. So go and play around with the calculator and go and take things out and see what you come back with. But everybody sits there and they go, oh my goodness gracious, that's so much money in that specific thing, 750 Rand. But you just told me you don't know what your cost is. And now you're telling me it's expensive. You go and do the calculation first, then let's have the debate. If you understand what I'm saying there, guys. Okay, Steve.
Also, Lee, in terms of, again, as we're talking about other things, but through the customer care that we do as well, we start looking at, this hourly rate. A lot of parts of the world go away from that hourly rate and look at flat rate pricing. And these are types of things that we can look at sort of going forward. But again, when you start quoting a figure, and I think we all do the same thing. If we take a car to the mechanic, how much is it to fix that? Oh, it's 550 Rand an hour. How long is it going to be? Oh, I don't know. I mean, we don't give people blank checks. These are the type of things that we don't do. So how many things do we purchase that we actually don't know what the cost is? So I think these are type of things that we touch on, in the other courses, which would open up in terms of how we actually generate that by making the customer feel comfortable, in terms of how we get there. And you can actually raise your returns and increase your profitability by just going away from this hourly rate. I think then it's something that we can touch on later on if the guys are interested. Right, again, what we're talking about, plumbers are taught within their curriculum business acumen. Again, I said it earlier, business acumen is certainly not taught in any of the courses that we would do in terms of becoming a qualified plumber. And then the next thing is, are plumbers, are they regarded as professionals by the public? And it's sad to say that as much as we would deem ourselves to be a professional, the sad fact is that we actually not looked upon as being professional. So therefore, the hard yards are there to try and get that rate. So I think that it's key that we learn on how to be professional in terms of running our business. And that goes back to our adverts, everything else, our budgets, how we are, and be able to quite comfortably stand in front of the client and say, yes, I do know how I got to my rate in terms of where we are. It's a term of confidence. And it's something that we need to look at. And sadly to say that as the plumbers or contractors, we need to increase that. We need to start bringing our A game to the table. Again, as we said, those figures that are there are estimates. So I think that everybody go back, look at your business, and it's there to create awareness. So you might not get a cheaper rate. You might have this. You might have a 4x4. You might have a paid-off bucky. But start looking at it, and I think be realistic and honest. I think that for me, sometimes it wasn't that I would be honest. I really need to look at it and say, I'm robbing my kids. I'm robbing my kids of a future. I'm running around charging 300 Rand an hour, and I'm taking away from my family. And that's what I was in business for, was to make a better life for my family, for myself, to provide the good things in life. And what I provided was ulcers and headaches and heart attacks and everything else. And I think that we need to look at that seriously when we're looking at our budgets and how we look at our businesses. Too often, I've found that contractors look at their business as being a hobby. This is not a hobby. You're in business to make money. And we need to become more professional in terms of how we are, in terms of professionalism. And again, these assist us with credit applications, in terms of applications for credit. And a lot of us can't get out of, a lot of contractors can't get out of the small business because they haven't run a proper business. And when the opportunity comes to obtain or land a major contract, or it's your gap to break out, you can't get it because you can't get the credit, or the banks won't give you the money, or they look at you at high risk. So even in your personal capacity, because you run a budget for your business, we need to look at, do we have a budget for ourselves? What about ourselves being our home? Do we have a separate budget for that, or does the business cover all of those things? So when you're going to go and apply for personal finance, you're now providing your books, and you don't earn a salary, and the wife doesn't earn one. So we really need to look at those budgets in terms of where we are, and I'm great to see that the guys are using them, and 50% of them run it that way. Risks and shortfalls, guys, we're getting into the run of it now. Take the opportunity to apply this budget to your business based on the established rate. If one is not charging the correct rate based on the must-haves, review your overheads. Really look at the must-haves. Don't think that because you don't have an income protector that you don't need it. Trust me, there's a lot of guys out there that have gone out of business or have got into great debt because they didn't have that one item. It's like insurance. We pay it hoping that we don't need it. but when we need it, we're glad that we paid it. And I think that taking those type of things out of your budget put you at great risk. So don't try and pull those things out that are going to put your business at risk. Build it on a solid foundation. Again, as I said, be honest with yourself in establishing your overheads. Don't sell yourself short. All too often, I've been guilty of it. Don't sell yourself short. You're a professional, act like one, and charge like one. Points to ponder. Build a sustainable business based on cost is fact and profit is policy. Place yourself in a position of strength so when asked how do you get to that rate, you are well versed to answer based on the facts of what it costs you to be in business. And you be the one that educates the guy at the merchant saying, I know what it costs to be in business, and you aren't going to be in there too long if you charge like that. So I think that that's the key fact, is base it on facts. Lee, that's us. Thank you. I trust that the presentation has been of assistance and provides you with a better insight to establishing plumbing rates. I think as Lee said earlier, guys, look at the Plumbers app, download the Plumbers app, has the calculator, review the notes and the presentation of this evening, and thank you. And to our sponsor, Plumlink, we can't thank them enough in terms of the support and the way in which we can provide information to you guys sitting in your home. So thank you to everybody concerned. Lee, I'm done.
Great, thanks a lot, Steve. If we can just switch our webcams on there for you. So there's a couple of questions, and I've been answering quite a few of them on the way, so not too many of them. So there's a couple of ones that I left up here, which I think is quite important that you discuss specifically. Okay, so David says he's in PE. He's sitting in PE, and he says he hears what we are saying, but really we will never get that in PE. We're currently seen as being expensive and are nowhere near that figure. So you want to comment on that, Steve?
Yeah, I think, you know, expensive based on what, Lee? I think that's what people need to get down to. Based on what? Are we basing this on a have plumb will go, tap washer type tap and go person? What are we comparing expensive to being? Are we looking at this as being a proper organized company that has all of the insurances in place, that have all of these costs to run a proper certified business? Are they paying their taxes? Do they pay their UIFs? Do they have all of these things? And I think it's very difficult to compare an apple with a pear. And I think it's up to the plumbers to sell that. I think the concept is that people think an apple's an apple or an apple's a pear. And I think it's up to the plumbers to actually, in terms of their adverts, and again, it's something that we talk about, but are we making the customer aware that we have insurance, that we are registered with the PILB, that we are these things other than we do burst pipes, block drains, and toilets? I think that the focus needs to go on the strength of the business, the qualities of the business, the guarantees of the business, all of those things, and we'll start changing that mindset. But when people say we'll never get that, I can assure you I will find guys in East London, PE, Bloemfontein that are getting that rate based on providing decent service and a decent business.
Yes, Steve, I'll concur what you're saying, but I hear David's concern, and he's agreeing with you. He's not arguing the fact. And I think, David, what I, you know, in the calculate your call out rate session, what I come across there is saying my objective, or the objective of these webinars through IOPSA and with Plumlink bringing there, is actually bringing that knowledge to the plumber. Because once the plumber has the knowledge and he understands, or the people understand that, you know what I've learned on this course is actually now I can see where my problems lie within my business. And it's that culture of change that we are trying to get through. And when we start getting that culture of change through, we are hoping that is how it's going to drive the industry. So yes, you might be a guinea pig in the beginning, but we've got to start somewhere, and and it's opened up your eyes, I'm sure, David. Yes, it hasn't solved your issue, but at least now you can stand in front of the guy who says, well, I charge 200 Rand an hour, and you can actually have a strong debate with him and saying, you know what, you're actually now crooking the industry, or you're not doing things right, and let me actually show you how, by going to the app, quickly pulling out the app and showing him from that perspective. The next question is from, just quickly reading here, Steve. Harry just says, and I can answer this one, he says a lot of the budgetary, so what he's asking here is he's saying that what you have shown in your session is only for one truck operation. He was talking about a 2-truck operation, and he says that bringing on a second truck, these budgetary items don't really change.
No, they don't, other than your insurances and other additional costs and your labor and everything else. So again,
yes.
And they do in terms of a 2-truck operation, of which we'll go into in other sessions. But I think the guys tend to look at it and say, okay, well, now we're going to sell 10 hours. But I think what happens is with a second truck, as we know, a lot of your time is now spent looking for work to keep those trucks going. So your billable 5 hours might go down to 3. So there are slight changes in terms of that, but very minimal. It'll be additional labor, plant and tools, insurance, those type of things. So it won't make a huge difference to that, but it does change as you get at a 3 and a 4. It starts to change in terms of the costs.
Yeah, you're 100% correct there, Steve. It doesn't really make much of a difference when you do the calculation. You can have a 8-truck operation, and your billable hours per doesn't change that much. We've done the exercises, sliced and diced it. We went all different ways, but it doesn't make any difference to that. And this is a basic cost to be in business. We're going to bring a little bit more advanced ones out later to go delve into that. Quickly going through the other things. Memory, you spoke about the a bill of quantity session. Yes, it is. There is going to be. If you're a member of the Institute of Plumbing, they've just brought out a rates guide for the industry, and we will actually be talking to that rates guide soon as well. So there will be a bill of quantity project or webinar sessions coming out for that one. Hanko, you indicate that, sorry, the app is not for, it's only for Apple and for Android. So unfortunately, we don't have a Microsoft product out at this specific point in time. And there was a question there that somebody was asking where they can find it. If you go into the App Store or the Apple Store, just type in App Plumber, APP space Plumber, App Plumber, and it'll come up from there. There's a problem. Colin just says Colin says the problem is there is a lot of Bakkie plumbers and are being supported by high-ranked officials and roundtables. I'm not going to comment on that one. Yes, Colin, we'll just leave it at that one. And then Harry, you make a brilliant statement there. Local plumbers should communicate better with each other as professionals and not pull each other down. And that is what the Institute is there for, guys, is in your area. Nothing's stopping you from, through the Institute, to formalize a little coffee session. It's not going to be looked as collusion because you're forming it under the association's banner, not doing a little sideline thing. So feel free, feel free that you can go and have a little coffee, but you just need somebody to coordinate it in the area, because you can't expect, remember the Institute of Plumbing is an association of volunteers. It's looking after the best interests of the plumbing industry. So please, in your area, I'm not too sure where you're from, Harry. If you're in a big metro, engage with the committees in the area. They look for volunteers. They love people like yourselves to get engaged. And then, Robert, you speak about the insurance industry. Oh, you're in Vera Park. So come have a cup of coffee with me, Harry. I'm happy. I'm also in Vera Park. No problem. So drop me a line. Then, Robert, you're 100% correct. He's talking about the insurance industry. IOPSA is engaging with them and doing this exact exercise that you have seen in this specific presentation to prove to them that what you are doing in the industry is actually killing the industry at the end of the day.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Good. Okay, Steve, that's it. Everybody is That's all the questions. Sorry, I took over your show there. You know me.
It's finally 100%.
Great.
I think just from my side, just based on the questions provided, guys, I think it's great. And I think that just to go on to your process of, is it price fixing? No, it's not. If you go and have a look at the engineers and everything else and doctors, they're charging in terms of the guidelines are set out by the association or where they are. So again, a lot of those charges are covered and they're quite comfortably done. We just need to up our game in terms of how we deliver that service and how we deliver quality work at a decent price. And I think that, guys, thank you very much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Steve. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for your attendance. We had a good audience today, very, very responsive, came out there. And please, keep a lookout for the other webinar sessions that are coming about. Spread the word, because that's what we want, guys. We want you to spread the word and say, come and get this knowledge so we can change our industry. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, Plumlink. And I call on you guys just to complete the surveys afterwards, because it gives us input, it gives us guidance as to what courses you're looking for as well. So please complete it. It will come right after the session. I'll be closing it off in 2 seconds or in in 30 seconds. Please just complete it. It'll take you less than 30 seconds to complete the survey. It'll bring us data back. And remember, guys, this is a recorded session. You'll get a recording at the end of this. You'll get a recording during the course of the next couple of days where you can go and look at the recording, and you'll get the link for the little test that's afterwards that will give you a certificate. But thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of you guys. And as Robert says, thank you very much, Robert. Stevie says you rock. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, guys. Enjoy.
Thank you. Yes, guys. Thank you very much.